That would have been prize.
Zach.
What are you doing with Charlie?
All right, guys. We have with us. Oh, let's restart that. We have with us today the famous Roman statesman and orator Cicero, who was under prescription by Mark Antony. The place is Brundisium, and the year is 43 BC.
How did that go? You've mocked our patience, Caroline, for a long time. For too long, you've mocked the Senate. No, I think it begins a question. Quousque tandem abutere Catalina patientia nostra, quam diu etiam furor iste tuus nos eludet, quem ad finem sese renata iactaber adacia, nihil ne te nocturnum praesidium palati, nihil urbis vigiliae, nihil timor populi, nihil concursus bonorum omnium, nihil hic munitissimus habendi senatus locus, nihil horum ora votusque movere. Patera tuo consilia non sentis. Constrictum iam horum omnium scientia tenere coniurationem tuum non vides. Quid proxima, quid superiore notte egerus, ubi fueris, quos convocaveris, quid conciliceberis, quem nostrum ignorare habetraveris. O tempora, o more, senatus haec intelligent, consul videt. Hic tamen vivit, imo vero etiam in senatum venit. Fit publici consuli particeps notare designar aculis ad caedem unum quemque nostrum. Mos autem fortes viri, satisfacere republicae videmo, si estius vid orem actela vitemus. Ad mortem te, Catalina, duci iussu consulis iam pridem apportebat, in te conferi pestem, quam tu in nos machinatus. With those very words on the 8th day of November in the year of my consulship, I began the first of 4 speeches against Lucius Sergius Catalina, the greatest threat Rome had faced since Tarquinius Superbus marched with his Etruscan army and was stopped by Horatius Cocles at the Sublician Bridge. Just 2 short months later, forces of Rome defeated Catalina and his army of traitors. This personal enemy of all who are good, this public enemy of the state, this brigand of Italy was found dead. Is it any wonder that the grateful citizens of Rome hailed me as Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland? Yet it was not for my individual glory that I risked my life in those violent days, or even the lives of my family, even my own reputation, as I sought to expose those in high places who were seeking the downfall of our city. Like Cincinnatus, who left his plow and walked to Rome in her hour of need. Cincinnatus, returned to that same plow when the crisis was over. So I, the son of a fuller from Arpinum, did only what any true Roman would have done when Rome called upon him for help. That was then. This is now. Now it's 20 years later. The only ones calling my name want me dead. I haven't shaved in more than a month. I was always a good writer. I suppose that's why I want to write an account of my life. People always think that I did the things that I did for glory. That's probably what they'll think of this biography, too. That was never the case. I really do love this republic. Not this republic. If this even is a republic we're living in. A republic founded on the ashes of the kings. It grew to be the greatest light the world had ever seen. That republic was worth serving. Where else could a boy in my humble background have had such opportunities? I was born 3 days before the Ides of January in the consulship of Caepio and Serranus. That would be 63 years ago. I was born on my grandfather's farm in Arpinum, south of Rome. And while we did move to Rome when I was 10, we're well connected. It's precisely those connections that show what opportunities were available in Rome at that time. When Alexander the Great's father, Philip, Macedonian, wanted an education for his son, he brought none other than the famous philosopher Aristotle from Athens. And he had Aristotle educate the sons of his nobles because he wanted Alexander to have educated friends to advise him well when he became king. But unless you were noble, there was no chance for an education like that. In Rome, it was completely different. My family, we were not patricians. We were not descended from the founders of Rome. But through hard work, we had managed to advance ourselves. At the time my brother Quintus and I were born, we owned land. We'd made a name for ourselves, and we were well connected with the leading citizens of the day. As for me, I was always a fan of literature, poetry. I even wrote a poem when I was a boy, Pontius Glaucus, poem in tetrameters. Part of me that always wanted to be known as a poet. Perhaps all things considered, that would have been for the best. That was not to be. In Rome, I studied under Philo the academic, and at the insistence of, and thanks to friends of my father, I acquired legal knowledge from those eminent statesmen, the Musci, and then rounded out my training as a proper Roman young man by serving in the military under Sulla in our war against the Socii, those Italians who had been our allies for centuries. I can tell you, I did not so much learn military strategy under Sulla. It's what a fearsome leader Sulla himself could be. It was no surprise to any of us who served under him that he would try to strengthen Rome with his own might. And while I've always shared his support of strong senatorial authority, I could never buy his heavy-handed means of achieving it. The man actually established proscription lists of people he thought should be killed to purify Rome. How was that any different from the reign of terror under our last king, Tarquinius Superbus? When any of us dared even to go out into the streets in that day, kept our heads down. We looked about us in fear. It was at just that time that I began my career as a public speaker. It would be surprised to know it, but I've always been a little bit nervous when I began to speak. I think it stems from that time Fear pervaded everyone, including me. Nevertheless, I took a case that could have ended my life instead and established me as the premier orator of Rome. There was this man, Sextus Rostus. His father had been murdered, and after the fact, his name had been put on the proscription list to make it seem as if the killing had been legal. This was all done so the man's property could be auctioned off publicly instead of going to his son. Who should benefit from this? None other than Chrysogonus, the golden one, the favorite of Sulla. To take on this case was in a very real way to take on the dictator himself. Yet take it on I did. I believed in this republic, and what is right should never yield to fear. I won that case. Soon had a flood of others. Yet I managed to get away to Greece for a time to continue my studies. Studied under Antiochus of Ascalon. Traveled to Asia Minor, where I studied under such luminaries as Xenocles of Adramyttium, Dionysius of Magnesia, Menippus of Caria. Yet it was a time I spent on the island of Rhodes with Apollonius, son of Molon, that had the greatest effect on my speaking. Apollonius knew no Latin, so I had to declaim my speeches in Greek. And I can testify that there is no greater training than to be forced to cast your thoughts in another language. It lends a precision to your thought. I've been grateful for it to this day. I still remember the afternoon when Apollonius said to me, he said, "Cicero, you have my praise and admiration, and Greece my pity and commiseration for those arts and eloquence that were her only glories, will be now transferred by you to Rome." And it was in those years that I got married. Wouldn't even mention it, were it not for the fact that the marriage produced my 2 children. Son Marcus was an everlasting disappointment. My daughter Tulia, the light of my life. My wife Terentia, she was from a wealthy family, wealthier than mine. In fact, she never let me forget it. She took more interest in my affairs of state than most statesmen's wives. I think if she'd been born a man, she would have been my political rival. We Romans have always called that pathway through statesmanship the cursus honorum. And indeed, it was once the course of honors. I'm not sure we ever recovered from the days of Sulla. He paved the way for men of power to seek control unto themselves. When the toga yields to arms, there's little honor to be had. Nevertheless, I found myself standing for office, being elected at the earliest legal age to each position, until at the age of 42, I stood for the consulship of Rome, the highest office in the land. People always think that we Romans are so traditional, and we are. We are. But by that reason, my opponents should have been elected. Running against me were Gaius Antonius Hippora and Lucius Sergius Catilina, and they were patricians. I was not. But patricians care more about their money. With the rumors going around about Catilina, how they got nervous. It was said that he wanted to abolish all debt, which was good news for the lower classes, but not to those to whom the debt was owed. So the patricians put their votes together. They elected one of their own, Marcus Antonius, and a novus homo, a new man in their eyes, me. I could hardly believe it. Consul of Rome. Well, I knew I was popular from my other elections, but still, Consul of Rome. Even Terentia was happy for me. Although she was probably just happy at being a consul's wife. Nevertheless, I had plans. I'd always been a student of history, and I thought back to the days when the Senate was strong. I could find fault even with that greatest general, Quintus Fabius, chiding him for his delaying tactics against Hannibal. Oh, those were men of bold action, and I longed to see us become such a government again. Fates, it seems, had other plans for my consulship. Barely taken office, and they brought before me the strangest case I'd ever seen. There was this man, Gaius Rabirius, 80 years old if he was a day, being tried for treason, for actions he had taken in his youth under the consulship of Fabius and Opimius. And back in those days, Gaius Gracchus had started an uprising of the people and the Senate, rightly concerned about the safety of the city, declared unheard of power for the consuls. In their words, it was to see to it that the republic suffered no harm. The Senate then left the consuls on their own to see how to accomplish that. Consul Opimius raised a military force, defeated Gracchus in his rebellion. Several thousand people died in the fighting. After the fact, Opimius was brought to trial for having contributed to the deaths of Roman citizens without giving them a trial of their own. Opimius simply cited the authority given him by the Senate and was acquitted. Now here we were 60 years later, and this old man was being tried for treason, and if convicted, would have been executed. I couldn't help thinking there was something more to this than met the eye. Besides, we hadn't had a treason trial since the days of King Tullus Hostilius. So I asked the man who brought the case, Gaius Julius Caesar, what was really behind it. Oh, Caesar gave some vague answer that those who'd been responsible for the deaths of Roman citizens without a trial should not escape justice. But even though the case ended in a mistrial, I could not shake the feeling that he may have intended something more. My consulship began under that cloud and never really moved out from under it. Things I tried got bogged down in the slow-moving Senate. I should have known better, having been a senator myself. But I think when we finally achieve high office, we think we will be able to accomplish things. Before I knew it, it was summer. It's time to elect consuls again. Catalina ran again, this time against Decimus Junius Silanus and Lucius Licinius Murena. We got word that Catalina, who was running for consul, was planning to assassinate the current consuls, Antonius and me. I took to wearing armor under my toga. As I went about the forum, occasionally letting a bit of the wool slip so that people would see the armor and think twice about assassinating a sitting consul of Rome. A lot of people saw through this madness, of course. They elected Silanus and Murena. Then we got anonymous reports. Having failed to obtain power by legitimate means, Catalina was planning a violent overthrow of the city. So in October, the Senate declared for Antonius and me the same authority that it had given to consuls Fabius and Opimius, the authority to see to it that the republic suffered no harm. My first thought was to do what Opimius had done and raise a force and destroy this uprising of Catalinas. But I couldn't forget the trial of Rabirius from earlier in the year. If an old man can be tried for treason, for actions taken in his youth, actions taken at the directions of his consul empowered by the Senate, then clearly senatorial authority was not what it should be. So I waited, gathered evidence, and formulated a plan. I became aware that Catalina was forming an army in the mountain passes of Etruria made of veterans from Sulla's army. began to realize if he were to lead this army on Rome, he would be no different from a hostage, a public enemy, no different from, say, Hannibal. Surely a hostage does not retain the rights of a keyless citizen. So I called the Senate together in early November. Everyone was there. Even Catalina showed up. No one wanted to sit by him. For nearly 45 minutes, I delivered a speech in which I made it abundantly clear that we knew exactly what was going on. The truth of the matter was, we did not know everything. It's important for Catalina to believe that we did. It was important for his fellow conspirators to believe that I knew who they were. At the end, Catalina tried to defend his actions. He was shouted down by the other senators. He fled from the Senate chamber. In the days and weeks that followed, we gathered additional evidence implicating high-ranking members of the Senate: Lentulus, Cethegus, Statilius, Gabinius, Caeparius. We brought them before a meeting. Once again, it was Caesar who advocated a very novel form of punishment. He suggested putting them in house arrest in towns throughout Italy. Fortunately, Cato was there. Marcus Porcius Cato, who always brought us back to our right selves. At his suggestion, insistence really, the Senate voted for summary execution. I remember the night that it happened well. We were in the Tullianum execution chamber. I watched as the executioner put the wooden blocks around their necks, began tightening the ropes to the point of strangulation. I remember ascending the steps to the waiting crowd outside. They were gathered in torchlight, and I announced to them, "Vixerunt," they have lived, indicating that their lives were no more. The grateful citizens of Rome escorted me to my house. Just a few weeks later, Antonius led the forces of Rome, defeated Catalina in open battle, and he was found dead. Then Charybdis opened her maw and swallowed everything. Just a few years later, Caesar was elected consul, began his war of conquest in Gaul. The Republic began its slide into the hands of power-hungry men like Publius Clodius Pulcher, who actually renounced his patrician status so that he could become a plebeian, and in that office prosecute me. His family and mine had never been close, but now he was charging that I was guilty of crime, of having put to death the 5 conspirators without giving them a proper trial. I knew Antonius, we were right, Antonius and I, the Senate. The Senate had empowered us. We had the authority. It was too violent. I wasn't going to stand trial in Rome. I mean, I might not make it alive out of the trial. So I went into voluntary exile. It was voluntary. We had done nothing wrong. It was voluntary exile. Oh, I was recalled the following year, of course. But nothing was really the same. Caesar returned from Gaul at the head of an army, despite having been ordered by the Senate to disband it. Those who loved Rome fled with Pompey, the great general, to Greece to organize a force to answer Caesar. Caesar pursued us, defeated Pompey's army. We fled to Egypt, where that great man, Pompey, was murdered by the boy King Ptolemy. Fortunately, we had Cato with us, as always. Cato, who led our soldiers back across the deserts of North Africa toward home, yet pursued by Caesar, unwilling to live under his tyranny or have his life taken from him by a tyrant, Cato nobly took his own. I felt as if I were living in a tragedy by Euripides. We were in a dictatorship again. And it was around that time that my daughter, Julia, died in childbirth. Terentia and I divorced shortly thereafter. I tried to console myself with a second marriage, estate, easily remedied a few months later by divorce. Violence continued to fill our streets. And just last year, Caesar himself was murdered before our very eyes in the Senate. And now I'm here, running from Caesar's man, Marcus Antonius, under prescription, trying to write an account of my life. Probably no one will read. Suppose we haven't come that far since the days of Sulla. I still remember the final part of that first speech I gave. Nam cum omnibus oris aliquid troceter fieri videmus ad audens, etiam qui natura mitissimi sumus, assiduitate molestiarum, sensum omnem humanitatis ex animis amittimus. For when at every hour we see or hear some atrocity taking place, even those of us who are by nature most gentle, growing accustomed to the violence, lose all sense of humanity from our souls. I've cared for this republic my entire life. I won't stop fighting now. I will not lose that last shred of humanity from my soul. The writing of these memoirs can wait. I must find my litter bearers. I must have them take me back to Rome.
Caesar never makes it back to Rome. He's apprehended by Cicero never makes it back to Rome. He is apprehended by Antony's men and murdered on the Via Appia, the Appian Way. His hands and head are later nailed to the rostra of the public speaking platform in Rome. Thank you.
Wow, there are actually people here. Who knew? Good to see you with that glasses.
Are you blind?
Yeah, totally. Mr. Brady, you want to shut that off, or you already have? Yeah, go ahead there. Yeah, so, wow.
We're just talking to people.